Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Kane. We had a very interesting decision in the very first room that I entered, and that was I had one bomb and then I could place it in two separate locations. In one location I would get a red card, and the other location I would get a spirit card alongside a tinted rock. So in this case, what do? Because if you go to the red sided card, it could be something really good, something like the Joker card, and you can imagine if I use a Joker card on the very first floor, that can lead to some very potentially disastrous opportunities. But of course, if I don't do it, and maybe that card is just something like an Ace of Hearts, it's not gonna have any effect on me, and I would much rather have the Spirit Heart, so I do have some protection on the second floor. And I think this decision comes up to not so much as personal preference, but more how comfortable you feel that the next floor is gonna be easy. That might sound very weird when you actually think about it, but it really is up to that fact, because if you have any Spirit Hearts, you obviously take them just to be safe. You never expect or want to get hit, but the fact is that there are some rooms which you're just gonna take damage and there's nothing you can really do about it. Well, in the other case, you're left up to the demise, and if you waste your bomb and don't have that protection, you're not only gonna play a bit more sloppily, just because I think subconsciously you're gonna know that maybe you're in a bit more of a danger, maybe you're gonna panic more, and that's gonna lead you maybe to taking damage. And it was hard a decision, and I really couldn't make up my mind, and I just went by the statistics route here. I know that I'm gonna be guaranteed to get that Spirit Heart, and I'm actually gonna have that as a protection later on, and if I destroy the Tinted Rock, I have a chance to maybe get a small rock, or maybe I even have something else. So in the average case scenario, I would say that going for that Tinted Rock plus a Spirit Heart is gonna be worth it more than just going for that red-sided card, just because of how many of those cards are actually useless. But what ended up happening, sadly, luckily my curiosity was satisfied, because I got another bomb from the Tinted Rock, and I was able to use my bomb on that particular card. And of course, in this case, it wasn't anything spectacular. I think it was the Ace of Clubs, something like that. So nothing too influential, and if I did go for that first, I would definitely regret my decision upon knowing what that would be. But that raises a question: is this kind of variance healthy or good for Isaac? I would say that in a lot of cases, it is, because I think this is one of those decisions that's kind of strategic. You have to think about the potential gains and the potential benefits that you're going to get from choosing either decision, and you have to know what the risk entails, because knowingly that you will not have any protection, and if you go for that card, that means that you're either very comfortable that you're not going to take any damage on the second floor, which either means that you're a very good player, or that you just maybe know your way around the game a bit more, so maybe you know other ways to actually protect yourself somehow. So it does incur that if you go for the card, you're a bit of a more skillful player than I am, and I definitely think that's one of those things or decisions that should be welcome in the game. You should be able to make the decision whatever you think you need more damage, DPS output, or whatever you need a way to actually get stronger. And this is definitely one of those cases. And you can imagine that if you do go for that card, and if maybe it's like 1 in 15 chance or something like that, and that does turn out to be a Joker card, and then maybe you have something like a 1 in 5 chance to get a good item out of the Devil Deal, then in that case you're gonna be much more better off for the rest of the run than I would, because I just picked Spirit Hearts. It's a very niche balance, because it's hard to say at which point this exact whole, not strategy, but I would say the dynamic of the situation, to which detail does it extend, because you can argue for a lot of variance in Isaac that it does come down to skill or maybe personal preference. So let's say, at which point do you decide to use your key on the shop, or maybe on the treasure room? Obviously, if you're a bit of a safer player, you might go to the treasure room, because you're guaranteed to get an item, or at least you have a very likely chance to get an item, and sometimes you can get to. But if you go to the shop, you know that there's a chance that there's going to be a key in there, and maybe you can get another shop item which would allow you to break the game, and then you can go to the treasure room back with that additional key, which means you can kind of get the best of both worlds. But there's also an equally likely, if not even more likely, chance that you're going to waste your key, you're not going to get anything in return, and you're going to miss out on the treasure room. And in this case, I would say that it comes down again. You can argue that you can make a very statistical approach to this. You can make a decision that would pay out in the average case scenario, and I would say that is going to the shop, of course, if you have enough money to afford both an item and both a key. Because on the average case, I think you're gonna get more items that way, and that will help your run, or at least you'll be stronger on that run in particular. And the same can be said in the first case. If I do go for that bomb and try to place my spirit heart, I'm my bomb down to get a spirit heart, that's guaranteed I'm gonna be in a better position, because not only, of course, do I get a spirit heart, but even if I do get a devil deal and not get hit, I can still take them, because now I have spirit hearts protecting me, so I can trade away my red hearts and not die, as opposed to if I just had red hearts. It's a delicate balance, I think, and it's one of those things that I always consider whenever I'm playing, and I always think, how could this run go differently? How can I make it better? How can I maybe make it worse? And that's not the answer, that's not the question you want to answer yourself. Obviously you don't want to make your run worse, but I think it's important to realize just the scope of this game and just how many different results and opportunities there are, which you maybe miss on a run-to-run basis. And I like these decisions, I like this kind of decisions, because I think not only does it incur a very statistical kind of approach in your mind, which I think is just good for, not for just Isaac, but just in general, whenever you're kind of going through life. I think it's important to evaluate statistically maybe what the best course of action is in the average case scenario. You have to think it in the terms of, if you're gonna do something, and maybe even if the odds don't look too good, if in the average case it's gonna pay out well, or at least if you're gonna get the benefit out of it, you should always take it, because even though you might lose in this particular case, if you keep doing those decisions over and over again throughout your lifetime, you're bound to come out on top and actually have a positive benefit out of it. And that might just incur not to just like bets or whatever, but really any aspect of life. And maybe this got a bit too philosophical at this point, but I definitely think that some of these applications that you learn in games and Isaac can be applied to other aspects of life in general. And I think that's, I'm just trying to provide a thought experiment, and I hope you're kind of following me here. With that said, this run was particularly not strong, but it did get stronger later on. It was one of those things that maybe you feel like you should be stronger, and I picked up Skinny Odd Mushroom hoping that it's going to increase my tier rate to a point where I'm actually going to be dealing a lot more damage, but apparently it doesn't go past your tier cap, which I was surprised. I really thought that it does, or maybe I just didn't have enough tier downgrades, upgrades, so it would pass my tier cap. So I was stuck in a position where I was at the hard cap, or the soft cap at 5, and I was still shooting very fast, but I think my overall DPS went down, so I wasn't too happy about that. I did pick up Explosivo later, before, and Explosivo has influenced my decision to pick up Skinny Odd Mushroom. My idea was, if I'm gonna shoot faster, at least I'm gonna shoot more Explosivo bombs, and that means that I'll be able to deal with tougher enemies faster. And even when, because Explosivo is kind of a tricky item in some cases, even when you're trying to beat enemies which aren't bosses or maybe which teleport around a lot, you do rely on not shooting the explosive bombs so I can actually deal some damage to them. And just because you shoot fast, and just because if you shoot slow, there's a good chance that a particular tier will be a bomb, which means that you won't do any damage with them. It's like shooting point blank shots at the enemies. So you want to shoot as fast as possible so you can actually maximize your chances of hitting them without the explosive shot, so with just normal tiers. And that was my maybe reasoning on why I decided to take Skinny Odd Mushroom when I already had Explosivo in that case. I really thought that Explosivo, I always underestimate the item in some case. I always think it's much better than it actually is, but then it turns out to be much better than I thought it was gonna be. That's kind of confusing, but whenever I pick up Explosivo, I always think this item, I know it's not that good, but you know, maybe in this case I can make it work. And I pick it up, and it turns out in some rooms it's just absolutely terrible, but then maybe you enter Mom's heart in this case, and I just managed to obliterate her in 5 seconds flat. Maybe not 5 seconds, but I did kill her very fast without too much danger to myself. It was also very helpful against Harsh, which is probably the main reason, the main benefit why you would go for an item like this. If you just had Boss Rush, I would say that maybe it's not worth picking up, because you're missing out on too much DPS. There are way too many bosses which dodge around, or jump around, or maybe hide, and they just drop your bombs, and rendering your DPS or your items useless. And it's maybe a bit of a tall order, maybe it's down to variance reliance. And Explosivo is one of those items which doesn't really shine depending on how strong your run is. You can have all the synergies in the world, but Explosivo can still be bad, and it just depends on which enemies you face, and that's maybe just the nature of this item, and for that reason maybe I don't like it as much as some of the other items that I got. Luckily, the saving grace in this case was Jacob's Ladder, and I think this is the first time I've actually picked it up and have it work for me. In all of the other cases I had other items which didn't synergize with it, which means that Jacob's Ladder was just useless to me, which is a bummer, but at least I made it work in this case. I'm not really sure how it works. I was trying to deduct, but apparently every time you shoot an enemy, there's an arc of tiers, I mean lasers coming out from that particular tier, and I think it connects with other tiers, and it can have a homing effect applied to it. It's a bit weird, but at least it looks cool, so I was actually able to do quite a lot with that. I think just this item has saved my run, because I arrived at Mom's cart at 30 minutes exactly. I beat her at something like 29:59. It was very tight, and I did imagine that not a lot of people actually completed both Boss Rush and Harsh in this case, and our damage penalty was also quite high. So I was thinking that this is maybe a run that's on the harder side and that we were gonna rank well, even though our score isn't that high, and that's exactly what happened. We ranked in the 16th place. Our exploration bonus wasn't as high. I didn't maybe take so much time to explore first. I did do kind of a rush strategy. I was trying to get to Boss Rush and Harsh as fast as possible, but overall it was still an enjoyable run, at least for what it was. Some people quit, obviously. You can't really do much about it. Variance is just gonna get you sometimes, and even though other people can have a good run, you can end up with a particularly bad one. And in this case, I just happened to have a decent run. It wasn't anything too spectacular. At the start it was actually kind of bad, but it did turn out to be better as the time goes on, and of course that does make sense, because you pick up more items and you're just overall stronger on the average. So yeah, rank 16, not too bad. It was a fun one. I hope you enjoyed our philosophical discussion about variance and statistics and how you can apply it to real life, and I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope to see you next time.